Ever get your blood work done and see liver function tests with a bunch of abbreviations? I feel like only a doctor could understand them.
It can definitely feel like you're trying to crack a secret code.
Right. Well, today's deep dive is all about cracking that code. We're talking liver function tests, or LFTs, and honestly, this stuff is way more interesting than I expected. The first thing I learned is that those tests don't just measure how well your liver is working.
It's definitely more nuanced than that.
Oh.
What they're really looking for are signs of liver damage, too, and how those signs point to different potential problems.
Like a medical mystery. And our expert source really breaks it down like a detective story, starting with those tongue-twisting enzymes, AST and ALT.
Which are actually pretty straightforward once you know what to look for. Think of it like this. AST and ALT normally hang out inside your liver cells. So if their levels are high in your blood, that's a red flag.
Because it means those cells might be, like, spilling their guts, so to speak.
Exactly. It suggests there could be some damage going on. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The degree of elevation is key. If those numbers are through the roof, like over 1,000, it usually means something is happening acutely.
The lecture mentioned things like a Tylenol overdose or a sudden severe infection. Yikes.
Right, those are the kinds of situations where you'd see those massive spikes. But here's the thing, high AST and ALT don't always mean the liver itself is the primary problem.
Wait, what? Explain that one to me.
Think of it like this. Sometimes the liver gets caught in the crossfire. Our source gave the example of gallstones, those little troublemakers that can block your bile ducts.
Okay, so plumbing problems. How does that translate into wonky liver tests?
Well, bile is supposed to flow freely from the liver to the gallbladder and onto the small intestine. When a gallstone blocks that flow, pressure builds up, and that pressure can actually damage liver cells, causing those telltale enzyme leaks we see in the blood.
So even though the gallstone is the root cause, the liver takes a hit in the process. Sneaky.
Exactly, and that's why interpreting LFTs is like detective work. You have to look at the whole picture and consider all the possible suspects.
Speaking of detective work, let's talk about cholestasis. I'll admit that word always sounds a little intimidating.
It's actually pretty simple. Cholestasis just means bile standing still. Imagine a traffic jam, but instead of cars, it's bile backing up in the liver.
And our source pointed to two other LFT stars that shine a spotlight on this bile backup, ALP and GGT.
These two are like the backup singers who become lead vocalists when cholestasis takes center stage. Elevated ALP and GGT tell us that bile flow is being disrupted, but they don't pinpoint the exact location of the problem.
That's where the detective work comes back in.
Precisely. It could be happening within the liver itself, or the blockage could be further down the line, outside the liver in the bile ducts.
Like our gallstone example earlier.
Exactly, and the lecture highlighted a condition called PBC, or primary biliary cholangitis, where your own immune system mistakenly attacks the bile ducts within the liver.
PBC, that's the one with a specific antibody test, right?
Right, and the lecture emphasized how important it is to consider PBC when you see that pattern of elevated ALP and GGT. Of course, it's not just gallstones or autoimmune diseases. Medications can mess with bile flow, too.
Even common ones, right? I was surprised to learn that estrogen, the hormone in birth control pills, could be a culprit.
That's why getting a thorough medical history is so important. It helps connect the dots between medications, potential risk factors, and those LFT results. Now, if the blockage is outside the liver, in the bile ducts themselves.
That's where imaging comes in, right? Good old ultrasound.
Yeah, exactly. Our expert emphasized that a right upper quadrant ultrasound, which focuses on that area where your liver, gallbladder, and bile ducts hang out, can literally show if the bile ducts are dilated, like a clogged pipe.
So we've got those enzyme spikes from potential damage, and then the backup singer enzymes telling us if bile flow is a problem. Makes me wonder, what else can these tests reveal?
Well, there's one more LFT character we should introduce, and trust me, this one's a bit of a chameleon.
Oh! I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's bilirubin. You've probably heard of it. It's what gives your skin that yellow tinge, jaundice, if your liver is struggling. But what many people don't realize is that bilirubin can tell a fascinatingly complex story.
Okay, bilirubin. It's the reason my eyes look a little more tired than usual after a big night out, if I'm remembering correctly.
That could be one reason, yeah. Bilirubin is actually a breakdown product of red blood cells. As red blood cells reach the end of their lifespan, they get broken down, and bilirubin is one of the byproducts. And you're right, high levels of bilirubin in the blood can lead to jaundice, that yellowish discoloration of the skin and eyes.
So bilirubin is the smoking gun for liver problems then?
Not so fast. It's more complicated than that. Remember how I called it a chameleon? That's because there are different types of bilirubin, unconjugated and conjugated.
Unconjugated,
Yeah.
conjugated. Sounds like a chemistry lesson. What's the difference?
Think of it like this. Unconjugated bilirubin is like a package that's been shipped but hasn't reached the processing plant yet. It's bilirubin that hasn't been processed by the liver.
And conjugated bilirubin is.
That's the package that's made it through processing. It's bilirubin that's been conjugated or processed by the liver and is ready to be excreted.
So if either one is high, it means something different is going on.
You got it. High unconjugated bilirubin often points to problems happening before the liver even gets involved. Our expert uses the example of hemolysis, where red blood cells are breaking down faster than they should.
They did mention that hemolysis can cause a buildup of unconjugated bilirubin because the liver can't keep up with all the extra work. Are there other reasons for it to be high?
Absolutely. Remember Gilbert's disease, that genetic condition we talked about earlier, where the enzyme that processes bilirubin is a bit sluggish?
Right, that would definitely slow things down.
Exactly. And there's another culprit our source mentioned, rifampin.
That's a medication, right?
Right again. It's used to treat tuberculosis, but it can interfere with the liver's ability to conjugate bilirubin, leading to, you guessed it, high unconjugated bilirubin levels.
So many possibilities. And I'm guessing high conjugated bilirubin has a whole other set of clues attached.
You know it. If we see high conjugated bilirubin, that's when we start thinking about problems within the liver itself, or further down the line in the bile drainage system.
Like a blockage. Those plumbing problems we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Remember, conjugated bilirubin is the type that's supposed to be excreted. If something is blocking its exit, it can back up and spill into the bloodstream.
Which can lead to some pretty telltale signs. I think everyone knows what dark urine means.
True. And then there are the pale stools, another sign that conjugated bilirubin isn't making its way out as it should. Our expert source provided a really helpful roadmap for diagnosing these bile flow issues, starting with that right upper quadrant ultrasound we mentioned earlier.
Oh, right. That can distinguish between a blockage within the liver, called intrahepatic cholestasis.
And a blockage outside the liver in the common bile duct called extrahepatic cholestasis.
Right. Two very different scenarios, which I imagine require very different approaches.
Absolutely. And that's why that ultrasound is so crucial. It's often the first step in unraveling the mystery of cholestasis.
So let's say the ultrasound shows that the bile duct is dilated. What happens next?
That's when the real detective work begins. Our expert source walks us through the usual suspects in cases of extrahepatic cholestasis, starting with those pesky gallstones we've mentioned a couple of times.
Makes sense. Those seem like prime suspects for clogging up the bile duct.
They certainly are, but it's not always that straightforward. Tumors, particularly those originating in the pancreas, can also obstruct the bile duct and lead to extrahepatic cholestasis.
That's a scary thought.
It is, and it highlights the importance of catching these blockages early. Our expert source also mentioned a condition called primary sclerosing cholangitis, or PSC, which causes inflammation and narrowing of the bile ducts both inside and outside the liver.
So PSC can mimic the symptoms of both intrahepatic and extrahepatic cholestasis.
Exactly. It's a bit of a wild card in the world of bile duct disorders. The good news is that doctors have a whole arsenal of tools to pinpoint the cause of the blockage.
Like that MRCP test, right? The one with the tongue twister name?
Yes. MRCP. It stands for magnetic resonance cholangiopancreatography.
I think I'll stick with MRCP. So what is it exactly?
It's a specialized type of MRI that provides incredibly detailed images of the liver, bile ducts, pancreas, basically the whole biliary tree. If the ultrasound suggests a blockage, MRCP can help pinpoint the exact location and cause.
That's incredible. It's like having X-ray vision for your bile ducts. Okay, so we've covered what happens when the blockage is outside the liver. What about intrahepatic cholestasis? What are the clues there?
Well, the first order of business is ruling out those viral intruders.
Viral intruders.
Viral hepatitis. Hepatitis A, B, and C can all infect the liver and cause inflammation that disrupts bile flow within the liver itself.
So if you see elevated ALP and GGT, along with those telltale signs of cholestasis, checking for hepatitis is a must.
Exactly. And our expert also highlighted primary biliary cholangitis, or PBC, which we touched on earlier. Remember, that's the autoimmune disease where the body's own immune system mistakenly attacks the bile ducts within the liver.
And there's that specific antibody test, AMA, that can help diagnose PBC.
Right, and then of course we can't forget about those sneaky medications. We've already talked about estrogen, but certain antibiotics and anticonvulsants can also disrupt bile flow within the liver. And sometimes, in rare cases, intrahepatic cholestasis can be caused by infiltrative diseases or genetic conditions that affect the liver's ability to transport bile.
Wow, so many possibilities. It's like solving a complex puzzle, figuring out what's causing those LFTs to go haywire.
It really is, and that's why it's so important to have a good medical team on your side guiding you through the diagnostic process.
So we've covered high unconjugated and high conjugated bilirubin. What about when total bilirubin is elevated? What does that tell us?
That's a great question, and it leads us to our last big aha moment about bilirubin.
Okay, I'm ready for it. Lay that bilirubin wisdom on me. What's the deal with high total bilirubin?
Well, as you might guess, it means there's a mix of both conjugated and unconjugated bilirubin causing mischief in the bloodstream. And while several things can lead to this, the most common culprit is liver cell injury.
Ah, so we circle back to those liver cells again.
Exactly. When liver cells are damaged, they can't process bilirubin as efficiently, which can lead to a buildup of both types. And because those damaged cells are also more likely to spill their contents, you often see other LFT abnormalities too.
Like those elevated AST and ALT levels we talked about earlier. It's all starting to click into place.
That's the beauty of these deep dives. It's like putting together a giant jigsaw puzzle, with each piece giving you a little more insight into the bigger picture. And in this case, the bigger picture is your liver health.
And I think I speak for everyone listening when I say we want to keep that picture looking bright and healthy. So to sum it all up, AST and ALT tell us about potential liver cell damage. ALP and GGT step into the spotlight when bile flow is backed up. And bilirubin, well, it's complicated.
Well said. Bilirubin is definitely the drama queen of the LFT world with its different forms and complex signaling.
But like you said, it's all about connecting the dots. High unconjugated bilirubin. Think about what's happening before the liver even gets involved, like hemolysis or Gilbert's disease. High conjugated bilirubin. That points to problems within the liver or further down the bile drainage system. And high total bilirubin often indicates liver cell injury, especially when it's accompanied by those elevated enzyme levels.
You've got it. Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on something our expert mentioned that I think is really important. They said that even with all this information, LFTs are just one piece of the puzzle.
Right, they need to be interpreted in the context of the individual's symptoms, medical history, and other lab results.
Exactly. So if you're ever concerned about your liver health or if you have any questions about your LFTs, the best thing to do is talk to your doctor.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think we've successfully navigated the intricate world of liver function tests.
This deep dive has definitely given me a whole new appreciation for those little liver function tests. They're not just numbers, they're clues to a much larger story.
Well said. And by learning to read those stories, we can gain valuable insights into our liver health and make more informed decisions.
So next time I see LFTs on my lab work, I'll be ready to ask all the right questions. But as always, I'll leave the diagnosing to the professionals.
Wise words. And remember, knowledge is power when it comes to your health.
That's a wrap on liver function tests. Until next time.